Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Just because I am talking now does not mean you should not stay in line and get yourself a beer because you are at Bell's. A huge round of applause to Bell's for having us this evening. For those of you watching at home, hello, and well, I'm sorry because we're having Bell's. Hopefully you are having
You can too.
You can too. Hopefully you're having something just as delicious. I am Zoe Clark. I'm going to go through a little bit of business before we get started this evening. And by business, I mean amazing trips. So one of the ways that you can connect aside from events with us here at Michigan Public is we also have started to go on trips with you all. And they have just been a delight. Rick and I went to London with many of you last year. That was terrific. Jody Westrick, our digital director who is in the audience, hi Jody, is going to Hawaii with April Bear this February. And we still have 2 other trip opportunities coming up. Steve Carmody, the one and only Steve Carmody, is going to be in Costa Rica with you in April. And our new general manager, Wendy Turner, who is in the house. Hi, Wendy. Woo, woo, woo. Wendy is going to be going to Paris in May. She's really not looking forward to it, as you can tell. Paris in the springtime, I've heard not great things. You can find out more about these travel events. Go to michiganpublic.org/travel. Also in the house, as we talk about general managers, is Stephen Williams, who is the general manager of WMUK, the one and only here in Kalamazoo. So from all of us in your public radio network, again, thank you so much for listening. I am Zoe Clark, the political director at Michigan Public. Here to my right is Rick Pluta. He is the senior Capitol correspondent for the Michigan Public Radio Network. Hello, Rick.
Hi.
Hi. To my left, we have Emily Lawler. I just can't say enough about what this one is doing right now. So Emily is the politics editor at the Detroit Free Press. So super easy, right? Just low key.
No big races.
No big races. And people have been really kind to you too, Emily.
Well, I'm just glad you invited me tonight because this is the only time I have to see my friends.
I know, it's true. We were talking at least we'll see each other Thursday night. And then I'm so excited to have Professor John Clark back here were any folks here 2 years ago? I should say no relation. Yeah. So we got the band back together again, right? 2 years. This was the same panel and we all just loved Kalamazoo and you so much. The professor is the professor and chair of the poli-sci department here at Western Michigan University. So hometown guy, and so appreciative because I know you've been so busy too.
Thank you. And we are not related, but I talked to my sisters.
Yes.
And they said that we can make you an honorary cousin.
I'm in. Actually,
And that's not all.
Yeah, that's not all. Wait, there's more.
It's your turn to host Thanksgiving dinner.
Okay, this is not politics, but isn't that nice for a second? Thanksgiving is my holiday. Though, I would be in it. If you said any other holiday, we're like, oh, but no, thanks. We're all invited because I make a mean mashed potato is all I'm saying. Hey, okay, so first just temperature check. How's everybody doing? Yeah? Okay, let's see hands for excited. Ooh, for those at home, that's 0.0005%.
Let's do this. Everybody put up your hands and use the number of fingers to tell us your stress level.
Yeah.
5 is all the way stressed.
Oh, we've got some 10s.
And we've already got some 10s.
Okay.
Okay, any 4s? 3s?
Uh-huh. Watch the one finger you leave up, though. Pointer fingers, please.
Any 1 fingers?
Yeah. How about anxiety?
Okay. So we've got Dr. Sanguine back
Yeah,
there.
we got a lot of anxiety. Yeah. But we've got two-hearted too. Okay, this one I think we can all agree on. How many hands, please, are just ready for it to be over? Yeah, I know. It's a lot right now on everybody's shoulders, but I think it's telling that so many of us, and I'm looking at you in the balcony too, we got a really great crowd coming together in a civil, hopefully, right? We're going to keep it civil, dialogue tonight and talk about politics together in our community. One of the things that we really feel deeply that we can all in public media together lean into. So let's start first. Emily Lawler, I'm going to turn to you. I was talking to John Selleck recently. He is a political consultant. He has run many statewide races. He said he has never in his entire lifetime, he's not that old, but he's kind of old. I hope he's watching right now, has seen a race in Michigan this close like this. Like we've always been a swing state, but this means we're the swingiest of states. What's going on?
Yeah, I think we're just in that top tier of swing states right now. Obviously, I think that makes sense with what I'm guessing about John's track record in terms of age. But, I think that Michigan really got thrust into this swing state category after Donald Trump's win here in 2016. We had been considered part of the blue wall, and you saw several of those states flip and go to Donald Trump in 2016. So I think that kind of put a national lens on us in a way that we deserved. So I know that that's maybe a controversial statement, or some people up here might disagree with me, but we had this sort of like perception that when it came to the general election every 4 years to pick the president, people would say, oh, Michigan's the safe blue state. And I was sitting here in this state covering a Republican governor, attorney general, both chambers of the legislature. Like I had a really, you could make a case for the legislature, like being how districts are drawn, but Republicans were winning statewide races here in the off years in a way that, made me think that they had the potential to win statewide races here in non-off years. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing.
Professor, I'm curious, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, and I guess 2016 changed everything really when Donald Trump won, but I'm thinking a lot about, has Michigan become a swing state because of Michigan voters or because of the candidates who are running now?
Well, I think it's kind of a combination. I completely agree with Emily that even when Michigan was considered part of the blue wall, the margins were incredibly close. And at the start of the election season, even when they weren't especially close, at the start of the election season, Michigan was always on the list of swing states. Yeah. And so even in, probably the biggest margin was in 2008. Barack Obama won relatively comfortably in 2008. But part of the reason was that John McCain's campaign was failing in other parts of the country. Mm-hmm. And they pulled all of their resources out of Michigan.
Famously, remember Sarah Palin went on air and was like, I don't think that was the right decision. When your VP candidate is calling your campaign decision out, that was something.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that Sarah Palin would be the person that I would want to get campaign strategy from. But
and also think about what a different time that was when Sarah Palin was.
It was an innocent time, wasn't it?
We were so innocent.
But the point is that Michigan has always been competitive. And it just so happened that in a series of elections that were very competitive elections, Michigan ended up voting for Democratic presidential candidates. Mm-hmm. And so 2016 in some ways was not that different than those previous elections. It just was surprising to a lot of people, in part because of what the pre-election polling had looked like, and in part because there were a lot of folks who just didn't take Donald Trump seriously as a candidate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, let's talk about this. And I want to start with Emily, that turnout here is huge. That, we talk about the percentages, but the number, just the raw number of people who get out and vote makes a huge difference. And Michigan has undergone some reforms via ballot measures, via legislation to make it easier for more people to vote. There's been fighting over that.
Yeah.
So why does it matter?
So every 2 years for the last 3 cycles, we've passed a pretty substantial change to how we vote in the state of Michigan. So, it's one of those things that's had a little bit of a cumulative effect. I want a train
amazing
joke, but it's not.
I know, right? Choo choo. I know it's something. First person that comes up with a good train and politics joke gets a Michigan radio something. Or Michigan Public. I did it.
Anyway, but I think that, those have sort of combined to make Election Day harder to predict for us because, we're going into our first presidential election here with early voting and no reason absentee in place at the same time. We're looking at same-day registration that we weren't looking at 8 years ago. We were looking at that 4 years ago, right?
No,
that was the
2 years
2021.
ago.
Okay.
Same-day registration was the first time because it was when abortion was on the ballot, and we saw those lines of college students at MSU, U of M, waiting in line after registering to then go vote.
Yeah. So there are more ways to vote than ever, and I think that impacts turnout a little bit. Like, Zoe mentioned the last-minute turnout potential. Like, I think we will be all probably watching some college campuses to see what the last-minute turnout looks like. And then there's also just more ways than ever to vote. So, people who 8 years ago, if they were out of the state on election day, might just not have cast a ballot, can no reason absentee vote now a lot easier. They can get on the permanent absentee voter list and just get that mailed to their house every time. So I think I would expect turnout to continue being pretty high.
So, Professor, typically in Michigan, more people voting equals advantage for Democratic tickets. Is there, considering all the new options that are out there right now, are there any new wrinkles in that we should be keeping in mind as we sort of check out the landscape?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, one of the things that we're seeing in other states that have early voting is that in this election cycle in 2024, in the states where they can track this, not every state can, but in the states where they can track this, Republicans are much more likely to use early voting than has been the case previously. And so the Democratic advantage in early voting is shrinking as the Republican early votes start to rise. Now in Michigan, it's a little bit different. We can't track that. And of course, this is all new to us. And so we don't yet know for sure what the impact is going to be. From the perspective of the campaigns and the parties, though, getting their supporters to vote early, whether it's through early voting, whether it's through absentee voting, whatever the case may be, means that they don't have to worry that on election day you get a sick kid or the boss gives you an assignment just as you are walking out the door to head to the polls. You don't have to worry about whether people are going to vote because it's already in the bank.
It's campaign 101 that any vote that you have in the bank is a vote that you don't have to worry about getting to the polls on election day.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we could have half the votes in by election day in this election.
It could very well be the case. And, there are some states where they typically experience long lines for voting on election day so that people have an incentive to try and vote some other way. That's not been so much the case in Michigan, at least not with the current balloting system that we have in place. But it's just one less thing to worry about.
Yeah.
And so getting it done early could very well be as many as half. The good news is for those people who work elections that because of some changes in the laws, it makes their job on election day easier in terms of processing those ballots and getting them counted. But at this point, it's the first time, so we don't really know what the impact is going to be.
Right. And we know that more than 1.2 million absentee ballots have already been returned. Let me just say that again. 1.2 million absentee ballots in the state of Michigan already returned. More than 7,000 folks have already used for the first time in presidential election history in Michigan the opportunity to go in person and vote in person. Detroit started on Saturday, East Lansing and Canton Township on Monday, and it will be open to the entire state, meaning any of you, if you are registered to vote, and you better be, and if you're at Issues and Ale talking about politics, I can only assume that you are, but you could go in person and vote on Saturday. And if, again, you are a political nerd, which again, you're here, the Secretary of State has a really new, cool thing, this dashboard, and let's figure out a way to maybe send you all the link, or even better, you can sign up for the new It's Just Politics newsletter, and we will link to it tomorrow, where you can follow along with this dashboard that Jocelyn Benson has created. So every single day you can check in and see how many ballots have actually been returned. And it's really, really cool to watch. It literally updates every 10 seconds or something insane like that.
I'm just curious, how many people have already voted?
Oh, great question. Wow. For those folks at home, that's 70%? I'm terrible
I
at
mean,
guessing
I'd say there's a
percentages,
good raise your hands again.
70 or 80%.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's more than 2/3.
That's amazing. Well done.
Hey, the rest of you.
So we're gonna, right, exactly. Yeah, go have another beer, right? Just like feed up. A reminder that in a little while, we're gonna open it up to your questions because that's the best part of the night. So we wanna just sort of tick through some of these things. One of the things that we're also tracking that we've put some links to in the newsletter is we have this really cool interactive map, aside from this dashboard of counting, is where all the presidential candidates have actually physically been, right? Because it's not just the number, the amount of times that they have come, but it is very specific about where they are coming. And so we have tracked this and it's really interesting. And one of the things that we see, not shocking, right, is a lot of folks coming to Detroit. But Professor, I really would love your take because one, Michelle Obama, possibly the most popular Democratic name in politics, surrogate, is going to be in Kalamazoo on Saturday.
I heard that.
She wants to see all of you. What do you make of Kamala Harris not being in Detroit with Michelle Obama, but in Kalamazoo on Saturday?
Well, I think for the people in the room, we know
It's bells, obviously.
that it's Kalamazoo. At least that's what some of the yard signs say. So I assume it must be the case. For one thing, for the candidates and their surrogates of both parties, they've already been to Detroit a lot. And they've already been to Grand Rapids a lot because it's sort of easy to pop in and out of. The venues are already there. They kind of know how to
Airports.
Exactly. We've seen certainly J.D. Vance be in some places that typically don't see presidential and vice presidential candidates.
Sparta, Big Rapids.
Yeah. But of course, Kalamazoo is a Democratic hotbed in southwestern Michigan. And by coming to places like Kalamazoo, candidates demonstrate for voters that they're concerned about people like us. And even if they don't come to Kalamazoo specifically, if they're visiting places like Kalamazoo, then again, it sort of demonstrates an interest in a particular set of voters in a way that probably at this point isn't going to change anybody's mind, but it might convince somebody to show up and vote. Or it might convince somebody to say to someone in their conversation network, wow, I went to the Harris rally in Kalamazoo on Saturday, and let me tell you about it. And we tend not to have conversations about politics, but it's much easier for folks to have conversations about things that they're doing. I'd be happy to tell any of you about my fantasy football team as soon as we're done here tonight, because we talk about those kinds. It doesn't mean you want to listen to the things we say, but we're much more likely to talk about the things that we're doing, the things that we're experiencing. And so, coming to a place like Kalamazoo, particularly a place that Vice President Harris was here when she was Vice President Harris running for Vice President. But now that she's at the top of the ticket, it's her first time back, and it gives them a chance to again let voters here know that they're interested and to rally enthusiasm among those Democratic voters here in our corner of the state.
Emily, so we've got Barack Obama, former president, maybe the second most popular Democrat, second only to Michelle, was here in Detroit. But we've seen Donald Trump come to Detroit a number of times. And we're going to move on from the presidential race because there's a lot more down ballot I want to talk about. But one of the things, and again, as the Detroit Free Press, that we're talking a lot about is what is the Detroit vote going to look like, particularly Black men in Detroit. What is Donald Trump actually doing when he comes to Detroit? And is it working?
It's kind of an interesting, I don't think that Donald Trump necessarily comes to Detroit every single time with Black men voters in mind. I think that, when he made the appearance with the Detroit Economic Club, he's looking for suburban business-minded voters that might be at a gathering like that, right? But he's definitely done some events that are targeting specifically Black voters in Detroit, specifically with like some of the Black pastors in Detroit, and trying to sort of tap into that community. And, I sort of read it as part of his overall strategy. He's trying to get people who maybe don't traditionally vote or don't traditionally vote for him to go to the ballot box and cast their votes for him. And, in large part, that's how he won in 2016. So I think he's going for the same strategy again. But I do think that, he definitely is not ignoring the city of Detroit. And it's worth noting that he gained votes in Detroit
he did.
between 2016 and 2020. Roughly, I think 6,000 more votes came in for him from the city. So in a race that's really on the margins, like, they're not competing for we don't have a proportional system where it's like, oh, a Democrat won Oakland County, a Democrat won Wayne County,
We don't have a statewide electoral college.
Exactly. So you're really, thank God. But, they're really looking to pick up just numbers of votes in a lot of different areas to piece together. And I think that's true of both campaigns.
So, Rick, that's what Donald Trump is trying to do. It's this sort of idea of losing less somewhere. One of the things that we've also been seeing is Democrats like Kamala Harris and like Alyssa Slackin, who is in the statewide Senate race, actually not just looking for or thinking about moderate Republican voters, but actually name checking them and saying, you have a place in my party. We saw on Monday, again, in Oakland County, looking towards sort of maybe moderate suburban women, former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney with Harris. And then in the debate last week with Alyssa Slackin, the Democrat, running against former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers in, again, this open U.S. Senate seat, literally saying in the debate, Republicans, you have a place, you have a voice in the party. And then just this morning, you were on the phone. I know because I heard it because you're very loud at home. This is where I say Rick and I are married, so it's not awkward. With Fred Upton, the former Republican congressman, still a Republican, former congressman. And he announced that he has already voted, he said. So again, much like all of you, he voted early for Kamala Harris. What do you make of this idea of both parties sort of going so Trump going after this Detroit vote, right? And then Kamala Harris going after this moderate Republican vote. It's fascinating.
Well, since apparently I'm loud at home, you've probably, one of the most fascinating phrases from this election is, to me, is permission structure. And that both campaigns, although I think it's more pronounced on the Democratic side, is that they're trying to create an avenue, even if it's just a one-time avenue, for Republicans who are Trump skeptical but not sold on Kamala Harris, or in the case of the U.S. Senate race, kind of the same thing, that they don't necessarily feel like they know the candidates, but they lean towards one party or the other, is creating this idea of like, hey, you know what? You may be a Republican, or, if you're on Team Republican, you may be a Democrat, but you don't like what you're seeing in your backyard right now, that you can help right the ship by voting with us on this one election. And I think that's what we're seeing evidence. Well, it's not just seeing evidence of it, that this has been explained to us, that this is the idea that we can siphon off some of the people who might normally go for the other team by by sending a message, largely using surrogates, Michelle Obama, to say, like, you know what, this one time, it's okay, you can do this. And it's also one of the reasons why the Democrats are leaning so heavily on the message of basically it's, let's fix America, let's fix politics.
Interesting. So I want to open it up to questions really, really quick, but I do, and so I hope also you can ask questions about the things that we've talked about now. But Emily, I want to go to you quickly because one of the things that I think has been underreported, not with the Detroit Free Press or not with Michigan Public, but in general, is the fact that the entire state house of representatives is up for election here in Michigan, right? So we were talking about the lines that we saw 2 years ago and the fact that we saw really history being made in Michigan when the entire state house and the entire state senate and the executive office went Democratic for the first time in 40 years. And I'm so curious that now the state house up for election again, there's like maybe 10, 12 sort of toss-up seats that really could help determine and will determine Gretchen Whitmer's final 2 years in office, her agenda, her legacy. What are you watching when you're watching the state house and which way it could go and how impactful that top of the ticket, Harris, Trump will have?
So two things. One is that we're working with new lines again. I know we were working with new lines last cycle after the redraw. The court threw some out. We have a dozen-ish new reconfigured districts in the Detroit area. So there's that, just as a disclaimer of nobody knows what will happen. But then beyond that, you have to think about the Democrats won that chamber by the skin of their teeth in 2022. That was an election where the top of the ticket was Gretchen Whitmer was running 11 points ahead of Tudor Dixon. We are not going to see anyone at the top of the ticket win the state by 11 points this cycle. I feel confident making that prediction. So I think the coattails will be different. I think the ticket splitting dynamics will be different. And I think that Democrats know they have a really hard fight on their hand to try to retain all those seats, and Republicans are certainly trying to give them a run for their money. They're not sleeping on any of these little districts, and it seems like there are some areas where everyone that are just toss-ups, right? So I think that's kind of the
Got
dynamic
a couple of them right here in this neighborhood.
Yeah, that's a good point.
One final question before we open it up. So I said Gretchen Whitmer, right? Legacy, final 2 years. She's a co-chair of the Harris campaign.
National co-chair.
National co-chair of the Harris campaign, previously the Biden-Harris campaign. They kept her on. So this is just like me thinking about this, but if you are a governor and you've got 2 more years, it really could portend your future and what you can get done with 11 days to go before the election or 12 days. Where do you think you would be campaigning? Because tomorrow, Gretchen Whitmer is going to be in Wyoming. What do you make of that, Professor? Did you see everyone's face? They were like, "Wah."
Why are you asking me?
Are you as fascinated by that as I
State
am?
or Michigan?
No. The state of Wyoming. Look at Lala knowing her small town. Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe she needs a new travel agent.
Right?
I don't know.
Like Wyoming. What is she doing in Wyoming?
No, but I'm serious. What is she doing in Wyoming?
Campaigning the Democrat. She is the ambassador of the Democratic brand.
Interesting.
Getting Liz Cheney votes. Good. That's good. I just want to put that out there because I find that fascinating.
Yeah, that seems like an odd place to be.
Okay, thank you.
For a lot of reasons.
When a PhD, kind of agrees with you. You feel good.
Yeah. But again, sometimes when you're campaigning in Wyoming, you're not there for Wyoming.
Right.
You're there for Montana.
Right.
Where there's a competitive Senate seat.
Yeah.
And it's right next door. And the fact that you're in Wyoming doesn't mean that you're after Wyoming voters. Yeah. It may be, and I don't know this to be true, but it may be that she's there because wherever it is they're going to be and whatever it is they're going to be doing sort of bleeds over into Montana, where the incumbent Senator John Tester is a Democrat who's won over and over and over in a state that only votes for Democrats when their name is John Tester.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe, make the other team, in this case, the Republicans, work harder for a place than they might have to otherwise. And then, you can divert resources elsewhere. But when you are a national co-chair of a presidential campaign
Mm-hmm.
from a swing state,
Mm-hmm.
your number one job
Mm-hmm.
is to win that state.
The state of Michigan.
Yeah,
Right.
but she's a
Right.
national co-chair, and I do think that it makes sense to deploy her nationally because, you know, in Michigan we see a lot of her. Like I think, you know, people have probably had a chance to see her over the years. And then also she's just sort of taken on this like celebrity status, right? Like she's doing all these podcasts, she's doing all these national appearances. You know, there's
Wrote
a
a book.
chance. Wrote a book. There's a chance that someone in Wyoming may turn out to see Gretchen Whitmer and have a good idea of who she is versus some of the other governors you could pop out there.
So if I'm reading you correctly, and we've known each other long enough that I know you will correct me if I'm not, that her celebrity cachet in Michigan, because she's so well known here as a practical matter, is somewhat diminished. Whereas the fact that she's been portrayed on Saturday Night Live makes her a national celebrity. And so that cachet is magnified elsewhere.
I think that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
we'll
she's
see.
better
And we'll
deployed.
see how Jamie Churches and Betsy Kofia, two state
Feel
house
about
seats,
that.
feel about
Yeah.
that come November 6th or 7th.
Yeah.
Okay, enough of us talking. I mean, we're going to keep talking because we're going to answer your questions, but enough of us. We want to hear from you. Suzanne has a microphone. She's going around. She's waving over in here. Throw up your hand. Oh, Andy, yay. So big shout out to Andy, who is a reporter at MERS, a fabulous politics reporter, which means he's going to put us on the hot seat and ask a really hard question. But go, Andy.
Hi, it's
She holds the microphone.
Okay.
Oh, yes,
Andy.
and let's
Sorry.
say,
Okay.
Suzanne, you don't try to take the microphone.
Don't
from
try to take
Suzanne.
the
All right.
microphone
Don't do
from
it.
Suzanne.
very, very well. First off, Wyoming, Michigan, near Grand Rapids, and I'm wondering, with all of the people like Violent J from ICP and Eminem and Fred Upton giving all of these
Sorry, Andy,
endorsements.
can I quickly interrupt that
Certainly.
this is the first time that insane clown posse has ever been brought up during an Issues and Ale. Andy dropped the Michigander ICP, but I just want to say that's insane clown posse who this week endorsed Kamala Harris. So just need to
Yes.
put that out there. Didn't have that on my bingo card, but Drake
And Eminem.
and Eminem.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
sorry, go ahead,
Well,
Andy.
no, perfect. So with all of these endorsements of Harris
Yeah.
from all of these strange sources, I'm wondering this far on, how much is this going to actually move the needle?
Professor, I'm so curious about this because as reporters, we talk about this constantly, right? Like, what will the Taylor Swift endorsement mean? What do we know research-wise about what these endorsements actually do? Or is it just about the vibes?
Well, it's certainly a little bit about the vibes,
Okay.
right? That matters. But it also, my guess is that none of those endorsements that Andy mentioned is likely to affect the decision by anyone in this room either to vote or change the decision for whom they will vote. But those endorsements, they ain't about you, right? They're about those people that might not be paying as much attention to politics. They might not have a plan to vote on election day or before election day. And it might call their attention to something that political junkies are constantly paying attention to, but that they might not be paying attention to. And so particularly some of the celebrity endorsements, Fred Upton may or may not fit into that category, but some of the celebrity musicians and actors and actresses and things like that, it's drawing attention, and it's drawing the attention of people who otherwise might not be paying attention to the election and to a particular candidate. Because for the rest of us, that's not new. There's no new information there, right? We sort of already know who these people are that are running. We sort of already know what our plan is for voting. So it doesn't matter so much to us, but there are other folks for whom it might matter, and especially in a close election.
Yeah, I think that's kind of another reflection of just trying to reach new audiences and how important. I get real glass this time. I'm so trustworthy.
Emily got a plastic glass the first time when we were
I was
going, like,
feeling
what did you do?
self-conscious.
And so did Rick.
Rick's made sense though.
We all know. No, it's true. We all know, don't leave Rick with glass.
No, I see it fitting into
I don't run with scissors either.
I see it fitting into the trend of just reaching new audiences. I have heard of more podcasts in the last 15 days than I've ever heard of lifetime total. Of course, I listen to my Michigan radio podcast or my Michigan public podcast, including my favorite, Doe Dynasty, which was amazing. You should all go back and listen to it.
So good.
So good. But, I have frankly never heard of Call Her Daddy. I have never heard of, or I've never listened to an episode of Joe Rogan, let's say. So, I think the candidates are really going out of their way to tap into these just totally different audiences, different than the people we see in this room, different than the people they see at their rallies, different than the people that read my paper.
So, well, on that, so it is axiomatic in political campaigning that, and the number is always made up in this axiom, but 60% of what you do doesn't matter. You just don't know which 60% until after the campaign is over.
Yeah.
Emily, when races, and we're talking about the statewide races for Senate and president, obviously there's also a down ballot effect for all of these. When races are this close, what doesn't matter?
No, you're right. Everything matters. Everything matters. Every demographic matters. I live in fear that I'm missing some, small segment of the population that's going to swing this election. And I'm sure that if I'm living in that fear, so are both campaigns.
People who still collect Beanie Babies. What direction is that demographic?
This is why Rick doesn't get glass cups, because he puts up Beanie Babies. Okay, let's do hands. Yeah, we've got one over here. And will you say, I didn't say this earlier because I know Andy, but will you say your name and where you're from?
Yes, I'm Bruce Vincent,
Hi,
and
Bruce.
we just moved to Mattawan from Schoolcraft.
Love
actually.
it.
Oh, wow.
So
Big move.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't want to get into that. I'm just thankful to be here to have a few beers, but
Yeah, that's the issues part of Issues and
yeah.
Ale.
And thank you for being here.
Thank you for having
It's
us.
interesting to place faces with the voices, and there's really only one surprise, but I promise not to say it's Rick. But anyways, so
No.
anyway,
Now you
it's
have
good.
to say it.
It's good. So anyway, I have a question. I'm trying to figure out, and it involves unfortunately the Hamas-Israeli situation, which is horrible.
Yeah.
We were fortunate enough to travel there a few years ago to see it with our own eyes, and we came away with a different perspective. I must say it was more pro-Palestinian from what we saw back then, before a year ago with the horrible situation that happened. So now here we are, and it's bad, but I don't see the logic of the protest vote. I just can't figure that out where, okay, to make a long story short, we're going to vote and maybe we get Trump in there. And Trump is in Netanyahu's back pocket, and so it's going to be horrible. So maybe instead of 50,000 people killed, 100, 150, well, where will it end? And so don't want to vote for Harris, who is vice president. And if there's anyone in this room who thinks the vice president of the United States has any power, I'd like to talk to them. But so now somehow, but she couldn't do anything. But now she says she will. Now, whether that's true or not, but there's a possibility. So why would you even consider voting for someone where there's no possibility, zero, versus someone who might give it a go?
Sure. So first, what I think I want to say this much is there is a war that is nearly halfway across the world right now that is impacting a huge amount of Michiganders. And I think I want to, you're right. Yeah.
Dearborn, et cetera,
Yeah.
and so here we are.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Right. So again, like I said, first, I think I just, because it is such an important and really for many people who have family members across overseas, I think I want to just name first, before we talk about the pure politics of it, I think I just personally need to just say, I want to hold a space for everyone who, when we're talking about war, it can be really hard. And I said the same thing 2 years ago when we're talking about abortion, that these are, we talk about them in political circumstances, but these are also human lives. So first, I just want to name that before we jump into this question that you have. And Professor Clark, I think you were looking to be able to answer it. So I want to throw it to you. And then I wanted the whole panel if someone wants to answer that. But I needed to just name that here for everybody today. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Zoe. I think it's the case for many of the people particularly in Dearborn in Michigan, that's where we're paying attention, but folks across the country, I might look at the difference between former President Trump and Vice President Harris on this issue or on any number of issues, and I might say, wow, that's a big difference in terms of where they stand. But if my personal political view is not over here, but it's over here, that's essentially the same. That's virtually indistinguishable to me. And I think for many folks in the Dearborn area, that's sort of how they see it. That the difference between the positions taken by the two major party candidates are, for them, virtually the same. Now, I might say, how could you possibly think that? How could you look at the candidates and their positions and come to that conclusion? But again, if way back, George Wallace in 1968 talked about the fact that there's not a dime's worth of difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. And I think for certain people on this issue, and perhaps on some other issues that are sort of high profile issues, for voters that are out here, they just don't see the difference. It's not as significant for them.
Okay.
Bruce, I'm
we
just gonna- yeah.
can't, yeah.
And for folks at home,
Okay,
if there isn't a mic, but I hear.
understand that, and I really, that's part of it. So I understand
Yeah.
about looking to the future, a possibility, because you go the one way, there's no
Yeah.
possibility. You
Yeah.
tell me I'm wrong. It's zero if you go with Trump, correct? I mean, I don't see
Well-
anything changing, but now you have someone who is at least saying that they may try to change things when she gets into power.
Yeah.
And maybe she can, maybe she can't, but isn't that better? Zero
Yeah.
to maybe 10%.
Let's let the professor
Yeah,
continue. with what
and
he's gonna say.
again, I think that I'm with you on this,
Yeah.
right? I think I view this the way that you view this. The other piece of it, I was talking to a political scientist last week who is retired now, but taught for many years at the University of Michigan at Dearborn and the Dearborn campus. And I asked him what his take on all of this was. And from his perspective, there are an awful lot of folks in the Dearborn area, and I don't want to sort of over generalize what that community is like, because it is a substantially diverse community. But the only presidential candidate that many folks find truly speaking to their interests is somebody like Jill Stein. And the question for them is, if I feel like the two major parties are simply taking me for granted, they're not concerned about the issues that concern me, the only way to get their attention is to go a different direction or to just sit at home. Now, I might say, what are you talking about? But it's hard to make the case to them that if, again, what's the difference? It doesn't matter which of those people are win. The things that I care about are not going to be addressed. The only person that's even coming close to addressing them is somebody that I know can't win, but I can make a statement that I think might change the conversation.
That
Rick,
might-
you want to go quickly, then we're going to keep you.
That might resonate. And you nailed it with, and I think there's also just one other wrinkle, which is that, that people who are passionate about that issue and understand the existential consequences don't really see, much of a difference between how the two parties are handling it. It's also why the Biden administration is feeling so pressed to, one of the reasons why, to come up with a resolution there and do it quickly. But the other thing is you've got one of the parties which is the Democrats, which ostensibly is more sympathetic and more empathetic on that particular question and interested in coming up with a solution. And so, and that's the party that you're going to align with, and they're not doing it. That's who you want to send a message to, because that's the group that you're engaged with.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I want to quickly say, as we were talking about podcasts, Doe Dynasty is wonderful. I happen to also like It's Just Politics. I'm really, really, really.
And it's short. I mean, you can listen to it on your
I
drive to
would
work.
love for folks who listen, though, to download a new podcast that the stateside team at Michigan Public and April Bayer, who's just incredible, have produced. And it's called What the Vote, which I just think is a great name. And one of the producers spent an entire episode talking exactly about this. And I think, look, the four of us are sitting up here and we're white. I don't have family that's there. I don't. And so you're asking us to answer this question that we can in terms of academia, in terms of politics, but I would love for folks to hear those first person voices. I'm not saying to change your mind, right? But I know that in this audience, the fact that you're here, it's because you're curious for so many different perspectives. And so what I would think we could all do to honor the situation is to listen to that 20 minutes. And again, we can disagree about it, but I think it will actually help answer a little bit of what you seem confounded about. And so I would really love for folks to listen to that episode. We'll link to it also, because again, I think that's what all of us, at least in this moment, who have shelter over our heads and can sit here and laugh about politics and have a beer, can at least do for this situation. Oh, and Lauren is holding up to make it even easier. You can do the QR code to download at these tables over here. And that's what I would just so ask you all to do. You don't have to agree, or maybe you do, but to listen to it and just take a moment to hear someone else's voice and perspective, because that's what all of us have to do in this moment. Okay, thank you for the question. Suzanne, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Alan Wilkie from Portage.
Alan?
Alan, it
Hi,
is.
Alan from Portage.
Nice to meet you, Zoe.
Nice to meet you.
So, I'm working the polls on Tuesday. And
Good for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just hoping someone shows up and wants a fight. So 2 days ago, I sat down with my absentee ballot, which has 30 different offices on it, 104 different individuals.
Yeah.
And I opened up Vote 411 to try and find out something about these people.
Yeah.
I was shocked by the number of people who didn't even put in a name, didn't have any sort of thing. How are we supposed to deal with these down ballot issues? And is there a better source to find out about what these people would stand for?
Yeah. Okay. So who has my soapbox that I can stand on here
You
to talk
have
about
one right now.
to talk about the diminishing local media in the state and throughout the nation? Look, we're in a information desert, right? Like again, MUK is here. Thank you, MUK. Michigan Public is here. The Detroit Free Press is here. I don't mean physically
Shout
here, I mean
out to
throughout the
Kalamazoo
state.
Gazette.
I was gonna say,
Kalamazoo
Gazette.
Julie Mack, longtime amazing reporter. But the statistics are heartbreaking in terms of the number of job losses that we have seen in the media whose job has been to tell you the information that you're looking for. And I don't have a fix. I mean, I do, right? It's 888-258-9866, michiganpublic.org, muk.org. Make your gift now. But I mean, I kid, but I also don't. Like we are at a precipice right now. I have said to Rick at the dinner table many a time, never have I felt like our jobs are more important and less important than ever before. And there is a huge lack of local journalism that is doing exactly what you're asking for. It's something that Wendy and I have sat in her office and talked many a times about, and it's heartbreaking. It just is. And what we all have to do is figure out together, and we're spending a lot of time trying to figure that out, how we can be in this community, right? How we can be in Portage, and how we can be in Wyoming, Michigan, and how we can be in downriver and up north and bring that. Because, I'll also say, like, some of this is on us. We spent the first, 17 minutes talking about the presidential race because it's sexy, because it's interesting, right? It's what we know about. But we also didn't talk about what some people might say are more parochial races, but some, if you're talking about school board, have dramatic effects, or county commissioner races. So I hear you. And I think other than to just say, it's very sad, it's catastrophic, I think, to what we're seeing in the lack of information and also misinformation. And I hope that together, all of us, and I know that Michigan Public and the FREEP and MUK want to be at the forefront of trying to fix that problem, but it's going to take all of us together.
I will say there is one other thing, is that because it's easier now to vote absentee and to use drop boxes and things like that, that means that you can take your ballot home, you can look at it, you can see who the candidates are, you can do some online research, you can contact your local League of Women Voters, that you have an opportunity basically to, have it there in front of you and not be standing in the voting booth going like,
Right, but
I don't
that's
know anything
great.
about
But
that.
if you Google that person's name and there is not a local journalistic outlet that you believe in that has that information, that's not
Why
helpful.
we're not debating that right now.
Let's
We're
get
trying
into it,
to-
man.
I think we are all in agreement on that. But there's this myth in American politics that elections that are more local are elections for which people have more information. And it's simply not true.
Right.
My guess is that everybody in this room knows who the major party candidates running for president of the United States are. My guess is that not everybody in this room can name any of the candidates running for the Kalamazoo Public Library Board. But it's going to be on. Oh, you got me.
I was going to say this is a public radio audience.
But it's
so
good.
maybe.
But it's
Are you a
and
candidate?
So even if you're, Rick's exactly right that if you're voting absentee, if you're voting by mail, you've got that ballot at home, you can look all that stuff up. Even if you're not, you can still do that homework before you go to the polling place. And if you don't do the homework before you go to the polling place, you're simply handing your vote off to somebody else who
Right.
did the work.
But I'll just say you can't do the homework if you don't have a textbook.
It is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard. There is absolutely, there's just not, and the League of Women Voters do as good a job in this area as they do anywhere in the country.
Yep.
And yet, the information that we have in terms of the utility of the information is the quality of the information the league gets from the candidates or doesn't get from the
Emily,
candidates.
as the politics editor of the largest newspaper in the state.
I think so.
Yeah, well, let's just say it. I mean, why not? No, I mean, like, how are you thinking about this?
So we have a voter guide, but it covers Wayne, Oakland, Macomb County. It does not get all the way over here to Kalamazoo. I apologize. So we do make an effort to get like that level of information, sort of a basic, biographical sketch of each candidate. But one thing that strikes me too is that we could be talking about this from the other direction. Like, do we need to be electing some of these positions? I think there have been some questions raised publicly about that for things like the university boards. Those are all convention races that you guys never
Convention
see.
nominations.
Yep,
Yeah.
you guys never see a primary for. And then, and there's this weird, dichotomy too, where, we elect the boards of 3 universities and then there's another, 13, 12.
13.
That the governor gets to
That the
appoint.
governor gets to a point, which is like, sort of begs the question why elections are mandated for some universities and not others. Some judges get appointed, certainly with vacancies and things like that, where other judges are elected. So, I do think that there is some room for sort of a top to bottom examination of what we're putting on the ticket.
Yeah, I'll do another shout out quickly too to some resources that are out there. One of the things that we often, I'm surprised it actually hasn't come up yet, is asked about the state Supreme Court races.
Yeah.
And we've done a lot of reporting and conversations with those races, because those are some, I think, that if you were doing like sort of a Venn diagram of the most important in terms of your day-to-day life and impact, aside from the state house, and what you need to know, because that they're on the non-partisan ballot. So if you're doing straight party, that can be hard. So you can find some resources too on the website to hear about more of those candidates as well.
You can, and although, at the Supreme Court and to a lesser degree at the appellate court level, you can also, at least if they're incumbents, look at some of their more famous decisions. But judicial candidates from the Supreme Court level on down, they really can't go out and promise that it's like, when this question is put in front of me, this is what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
One actually did do that recently and got flamed for it. But that all they can do is promise to be as fair and impartial and as knowledgeable about the application of the law as they could possibly be. I mean, they can't say, you know, when a drug dealing case comes before me, it's time to crack down on these people. And so that makes those decisions that those are based on name ID. I mean, there's a reason why historically, you know, Irish names are it's just really, really great.
Lawler's
to get
an
them
Irish
around.
name, if anyone's wondering.
Judge Emily Lawler. I kind of like
It's not
it.
bad, right?
I
Yeah.
feel judged by you a lot already. But they're very difficult to campaign for, and most of the campaigning, quite frankly, you know, happens in front of, you know, attorneys groups and stuff like that. I realize there's no useful guidance in that, for which I apologize. But it's just an anachronism that we elected these candidates who basically can't do what we typically consider campaigning.
Can I give you just a really quick tip, which is kind of awful, and I can't believe I've said this because I've had a pint, so I'm going to tell you. One of the things that I do, I check out their Facebook profile. I mean it. It is fascinating, the things that I have learned from some of these candidates who are running, just going on their Facebook. And I'll start putting screenshots out too.
You might
No.
also look at who's endorsing them. That
Yep.
might give you some indication of where they stand on issues. And oftentimes on their, if they have a campaign page, website or Facebook page, they'll list those endorsements. And so you can sort of get a sense of who it is in your community that supports them. And that might be useful information too.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is being a citizen is hard work if you're going to do it the right way.
Yeah, but let's make it a little easier. Okay, Suzanne, yeah.
Yes, hello. My name is Harold Boy.
Hi, Harold.
I'm from Kalamazoo. Is that awfully close? Yeah, I want to do a response to that gentleman. You escaped Schoolcraft to go to Mattawan? Is that what? Yeah. And also to you, and it involves the same issue about the Democratic Party. And I consider myself a progressive, used to be liberal. And to what he was saying about, Gaza and that kind of thing, I have friends who are Palestinian. I've been demonstrating about Gaza. I'm really pessimistic about what's going to happen. And I understand the emotion that they have because they look what Biden administration did. And they're afraid that Harris will do the same. I think that's where they're coming from. I'm going to vote for her. I'm working for her. I'm canvassing for her. But still, this is hard for me because my heart bleeds for Gaza. Now, this is about response to what you all said about how Harris is reaching out to Republicans, and this is the same damn thing that Hillary did in 2016. And it's something that's happened a long time with the Democratic Party, how they've been moving to the right, beginning with Carter, actually, and the neoliberal economics and so on.
Democratic Leadership Council.
Yeah, the DLC, very much so, and Clinton. The working class have been left out. And they used to be solid Democratic, right? And they've been left out, and they feel it. And I understand where they're coming from. Hillary blamed Jill Stein for losing Michigan. She got 50,000 votes, right? And I think Jill Stein should have not, I think she shouldn't run. I think she should work for Kamala, actually. But I understand, I agree with her issues. And like I said, I'm really heartbroken. But the other thing is 150,000 people voted in that election who didn't vote for president at all. And Michael Moore had a television show about the people who didn't vote in Flint. And these are working class, poorer people. The Democratic Party has become the party for people like us, the middle class, educated, that kind of people, the high tech people. The Democratic Party has left the working class. And I wonder about this reaching out to Republicans rather than going full bore liberal, progressive policies and that kind of thing.
So Harold, let me, thank you for that. Professor, let me look to you about what it looks like. I mean, right, like Bill Clinton, we know it's been basically famously on the record in 2016 was saying to the Clinton campaign, we need to do more for labor, right? Like we need to do more for those union voters that have made the Democratic Party what it is in the blue wall, as you were talking about, Emily. Didn't really listen, right? And then Joe Biden won many of them back in 2020 here in Michigan in particular. What do you see as what the union vote looks like, particularly as we saw the Teamsters nationally not endorse for this first time in 30 years, although we should say the Michigan Teamsters did for Harris. Sean Fain speaking at the DNC, what is the union vote and the Democratic Party's relationship right now in 2024?
Yeah, that's a great question, because if you look simply at public policy, the Biden administration has been the most pro-labor administration possibly in American history in terms of the things that they've actually done. Not necessarily the things that they've said, but the things that they've actually done. And I think it's safe to say that during his term in office, Donald Trump was not at all friendly to organized labor. And so if as political scientists, as observers of politics, we sort of say, well, gosh, if you want to demonstrate to these people that you're on their side, then you have to do things. And here we have, a clear example of where that doesn't even seem to matter to some people. I think with the Teamsters, it's a lot more about Teamster politics than it is about national politics.
Because it is.
Because it is.
Well, the Teamsters have never been, locked into the Democratic coalition.
They've always been the outlier. Yeah. And I think, for some folks in organized labor, some aspects of organized labor, the fact that Donald Trump is talking about putting tariffs on sort of everything that comes into the country from anywhere, that resonates because of the implications of NAFTA and free trade and so on and so forth. So I sort of see how he's got an inroad there. But if you look at the actual actions of the Trump administration and compare those to the actions of the Biden administration on organized labor specifically, there's just no comparison. I mean, they're not even in the same ballpark. And you could agree or disagree that that's good public policy. But from the perspective of organized labor, one might think that Joe Biden did almost as much as he could possibly do. And yet that may not be enough.
Including being the first sitting president to actually go on strike with
walk a picket line.
To walk a picket line. So we've got just a few more minutes left. So I want to keep getting as many questions as we can. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Ben Lando. I'm from Kalamazoo.
Hi, Ben.
I'm also the founder and publisher of Now Kalamazoo, which there we go.
Ooh, you got some.
There we go. We're an independent nonprofit community news organization covering Kalamazoo County.
Amazing.
NowKalamazoo.org. We publish a daily email newsletter, local news and events roundup. We also partner with WMUK a lot, so big shout out to Stephen over there.
This is
and WMUK.
amazing.
It's wonderful. So we do have some local news. In addition to talking about the importance of local news, and that we have another resource here in Kalamazoo to cover it.
Will you say your website?
NowKalamazoo.org.
NowKalamazoo.org.
Yeah, we're a nonprofit. We're a product of we're independently operated by the new nonprofit called the Local Journalism Foundation of Kalamazoo County.
Love it.
The question that I had, thank you, that's great. It's a free, everything we do is free. Well, it costs money, as you all know, to do it.
Yeah, and blood,
It's
sweat,
free,
and tears
exactly,
is the
but it's
editor.
free to read it and subscribe to it. But the question that I did have was about the impact of misinformation and disinformation on the work that you all do, the work that we all do, and what you all are preparing for, essentially like immediately after the election. And the reason I bring this up is because, going back to what you said, the reason that a lot of the people in the 411 voter guide are empty is because they refuse to give their information.
Yep.
We try to cover, we had an email from a reader about Oshimo Township. It's a small township in Kalamazoo County. And there's this group of people trying to oust the entire board, and they're making their own handwritten yard signs. And we said, okay, well, that's interesting. Let's see what that's all about. And we had a reporter that reached out to them, and they all refused to talk to us. And they said, well, we know that you all, the media, you twist our words. And I was like, lady, we've never talked to you. Like, we're pretty new. We've never talked to you in the past. We just want to understand what you're campaigning on, and so we can write a story about it, like the purpose of it. And so that's like a small level evidence of such a big disease going through our communities across the country. And so I'm wondering how you all are addressing that kind of, especially on a statewide level, and seeing just the quality, especially because aside from independent like organizations like ours and public radio stations like Michigan Public and WMUK, that the quality of news in general is kind of feeding into this problem that we're having as well.
So I want to throw it to Emily Lawler, because I think out of all of us on this stage, you are getting it the hardest right now. No, I mean it. I mean, I think that's very fair. Like, we get some of it and some of that mail, but as the politics editor at the state's, again, largest newspaper, what are you seeing right now in terms of misinformation and also candidates just refusing to answer questions to your reporters?
Well, first of all, I think you're here from my nightmares to keep me up at night, because, you know, when I look ahead to the misinformation landscape, which first of all, I should say we've partnered with the Center for Media Engagement this cycle. We have a misinformation tracker that we've been using to try to, you know, figure out where it's popping up and what kinds of themes we're seeing. There's a lot of it. We have a freelancer that's dedicated to looking at misinformation right now. I purposefully structured him to stay on after Election Day because I expect that we could see more crop up then. So, you know, it's hard. It's hard to deal with. We try to do as much pre-bunking as we can in terms of like explaining. Pre-bunking is like debunking, but in advance. So, you know, we try to like sort of explain the processes. I think one of the things that really caught me off guard after the 2020 election was just how much people didn't understand about the intricacies of elections. Some of it was me. Like, I didn't understand some of the intricacies of what happens between when you cast your vote, when it's canvassed, and when it goes to the Board of State Canvassers. But, you know, I remember things like in that Rudy Giuliani hearing that the Michigan State House of Representatives held, you know, people were presenting really normal processes as like evidence of fraud, right? So, you know, for instance, like I remember one of the speakers in that hearing saying, you know, we would see a big batch of votes all come in at once. Yeah, that's a precinct. Like, that's how they're counted. Right. And so, you know, we've really tried to like boost our efforts to just tell people how things work so that they're not surprised on election night. So I think that's part of it. I think also that, you know, in terms of like, I guess, you know, misinformation is one side of your question and access is the other side of your question. It's really hard. I don't go out in the field as much anymore. I am, you know, an editor, so I'm like hiding under my desk crying and eating Halloween candy while my reporters are out in the field. Thanks, Zoe. Thanks for the beer.
All the beers for Emily, all the beers.
But I remember,
And all the Halloween candy.
but I remember having been out in the field in previous cycles more and just feeling like, especially with Trump voters and especially at Trump rallies, that I was sort of like a representative of the media to them, right? You know, like they were talking to the media probably for the first time, and you know, I would make it a point to relate to them on something. And it's easy for me. Part of my family's farmers. I grew up on a dirt road. Like, I'm, you know, sort of a relatable person. But, you know, I really made that effort to, like, before I started asking them about politics, ask them about themselves. And I got that reaction sometimes where people would say, you know, I don't trust the media, but, you know, it was nice talking to you, or something like that. And like, it's not, that's a needle in a haystack, right? Like, I can't talk to every Michigander. I can't talk to everyone. But, you know, the statistics on who knows a person in the media are just really low right now. More people know, like more people in almost every segment of the demographic know a scientist than a journalist right now. Yeah.
Yeah, very well said. I guess a couple of things. One of them is that we have, the way that we vote has changed dramatically and mostly for the better, because it's making it easier for more people to vote. But we still, the public writ large doesn't entirely understand it the way that they understand, like, on election day, you get in the car, you drive to, your school, and you go and you fill out the ballot and you see your friends. And so I think it is going to take some number of cycles before that becomes normalized and it's not this exotic creature that seems, so open to all kinds of skullduggery, because it's a pretty secure system. I mean, no election is perfect. And if you don't believe me, believe a Republican governor named John Engler, who said that we're entitled to a fair election, but not a perfect election. And that's basically, the way that it works. The other thing I'll point out is, I think we've agreed that the election is not going to be over on election day, and we are planning you're sorry. We are planning not just for, covering election day, but all the things that we're widely expecting to happen, in the aftermath of the votes being tallied, then counted, then certified, and likely, well, almost certainly, because there's in every election, the court battles that happen in either, lower level or higher level races.
So we're getting low on time. I think we're going to leave it at that. I think I do want to say one more thing, which is you actually do have some power in this, right? There is this idea that a lie, what's the quote? The lie can go halfway around the world before
While the truth is lacing up its sneakers.
Its boots. Boots, sneakers, sandals. Yeah. But look, like you're not powerless. You actually do have a lot of power. And that is this idea that you have a voice. You're not passive in all of this. The fact that you're here. I was thinking a lot about a public radio reporter, Sam Gringlas, who is in Georgia. He works for Georgia Public Radio. He is doing the work just like Rick Pluta is right now. There are these public radio reporters in states throughout the country. There are places and there are people who are doing the really hard work for you. And this is going to sound a little bit like a fundraising spot, and I'm sorry, but it is. Like, you have the power right now to be a part of that, whether it's Kalamazoo Now, whether it's MUK, whether it's Michigan Public. As we build this idea that we can create an infrastructure and a system where you will get information that you may not always believe, or excuse me, that you may not always like, but that you can believe, right? That you don't have to agree with it, but you know that it's the truth. And I think that's what all of us are missing right now, right? The Walter Cronkite, that sort of idea that there is this person or this group or this place that you can go to and you can just understand your world without having to do so much work. And you have some ability to be part of that right now by being here, whether it's events like this, whether it's, getting in touch with us about stories that you like or didn't like. I just would really push you to do that. The other thing that this is going to sound really hoity-toity, but I grew up in Ann Arbor, or hippy-dippy, but I grew up in Ann Arbor, and so I'm going to say it. I really hope that on election day and the day after and the day after that, you may again be angry or happy or anxious or excited. But when you're like at that red light and someone cuts you off, or like someone turns in front of you, like, could we just show a little kindness in the next few weeks? It is going to take everything for you to do that. Everything. I had a moment myself. I was sleep deprived a few days ago, and it took everything to be kind. But man, do I think it makes some dividends. And like, we're a small little group here. We're a small group online who are watching. But I really think if you can do that, someone else who you let turn that left in front of you, or you let like jump ahead of you because they have like a smaller amount of groceries, like just do that for the next few weeks. You will vote and you will do that. And it feels small, but you will actually make a difference. And that is just my small little hope that you will do in the next few weeks. I know it sounds so dorky. I'm sorry, but that is my soapbox tonight. Thank you all so much. Just very quickly, I need a vibe check, not from everybody, but just from my former professor. Did I do okay? Yeah, thumbs up. Okay. I never wanted to work in journalism. I wanted to work in politics. And then I met a journalism professor at the University of Michigan 1.5 million years ago, right? Like $14.97. Mark McDonald, who is a fabulous reporter who I was so happy to see. It's been a decade since I've seen him, and he's in the audience, and the whole night I've been trying to make eye contact with him because I've been so nervous. So if I did okay, yeah. Like a B plus. Yeah, he was always really hard. Okay. Anyway, thank you everyone tonight for being here. I know this amazing crew is going to hang out for a little while longer and answer any questions. And we have a winner of the sweepstakes. Here we go. Ready? Drum roll. Oh, Rick wants to. Okay. Drum roll, please.
Oh, no, it's just like the Oscars. Like I read it and then I hand it to her.
Oh, I see. And then we go. Mark Linecky? Wait, but where is Mark? Is Mark here?
Well, his email address is.
Yeah. Oh, Mark, come on down.
Do you all want to know how many were in that thing?
Lauren, what did he win?
A tote bag, a mug, and a t-shirt, which I do need to get your t-shirt size.
Okay, Lauren's gonna get your t-shirt size.
But there was precisely only one person who guessed the correct number, and that number was 57. So nail on the head. It was
Well
only
done,
one
Mark.
person. So you made my
Okay.
life a little easier.
As
but-
we wrap up tonight, a couple more things. Again, all of the travel events you can find out more about at michiganpublic.org/travel. A reminder that events like this all happen because of folks who give, right? These are free. They will remain free, but they happen because folks give. michiganpublic.org/donate. Again, you can sign up for the It's Just Politics newsletter. There is a QR code to download all of those amazing podcasts that we also talked about on all of the tables. Again, for Rick Pluta, Emily Lawler, John Clark, thank you so much for all coming out tonight. And go vote for the 5% of you that haven't already.
Appreciate it so much.